You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. You are a city on a hill. Jesus uses these three images in the gospel today to help teach us how we are to be families and parishes, the church, as individuals. To be salt, light, city on a hill. So we should reflect more on what these images that he gives us mean. Because all three of them teach us that we're made not just for ourselves, but that we're to live for others. So first, you are the salt of the earth. So salt. What do we use salt for? Well, one thing that we use it for is in food. Salt helps us to bring flavor, to spice up the food that we have. Now, if you think about it, salt is not just for its own taste. I mean, we don't go around just eating a whole bunch of salt on its own. Hopefully we don't. But we put it in other foods because it often helps to bring out the flavors of that food themselves and make it more enjoyable. So this is kind of the point of the church. It's the point of our lives. So to be Christian doesn't mean just to live to, in a sense, flavor ourselves, but to also bring that flavor of the gospel out to the rest of the world. Salt, too, is used as a preservative. And so we could think of us as being salt in that way as well, that we're called to help preserve the world. Without God, our culture, the world around us, can die and decay. So we need to act as salt, preserving the world from sin. Also, a third thing that we use salt for, especially during the wintertime, is to help melt the ice. It loosens up what's frozen. And so, the same way for us. To be salt, you could think of loosening a world that's frozen in the destructive ways of sin. So, we're salt of the earth. Next, Jesus says that we're the light of the world. So, light. Think about light. We probably don't always think about light, even though it's everywhere. We need it in order to be able to see. But just like the salt wasn't put in there just for itself, so too the light isn't simply for itself, but it's by the light that we see everything else. And without light, we wouldn't be able to know which way we are to go. And so in a similar way, if we're to be like light for the world, then we need to bring a kind of spiritual light of God, which will help others be able to move through their course of their life and see their way to eternal happiness. The light of God's gospel of forgiveness needs to be shined into those dark corners where hatred dwells, shed light and expose the sin so that Jesus may heal it. So we're to be light to the world. And then closely connected to the light, he says, the image of a city on a hill. So what does this one mean? This one might be a little bit more difficult than the first two. But if we think of it in terms of, how we're used to giving directions, oftentimes based upon landmarks, right? So, go north along that road until you get to so-and-so's place, and then you take a right and you keep going until you see the barn, but then, if you see the haystacks, you went too far. So we need those landmarks to help guide us along the proper way. And so if you think about something up on a hill, especially something as large as a city, you can see that from miles off. It's a beacon, a landmark to show the way. And so that's the same thing for us. We're to be a city on a hill, not kind of putting ourselves over others to kind of be proud and show off. No, that's not. But more as a model to help guide others, guide their lives. And that's the role of the church, to be a kind of landmark to show others that way to what will bring us happiness. So salt of the earth, light of the world, a city on a hill. With these three images, Jesus is telling us to be models, to be examples for others. As a community of faith, he tells us that we must take care never to let the salt lose its flavor or to hide the light under a bushel basket. Because that can sometimes be our temptation, is to simply blend in with the rest of society, to become kind of an echo of secular culture. If our faith doesn't take deep root in the actions that we do every day, then we might begin to start looking like everybody else, sound like everybody else, move like everybody else, have the same opinions and ideas. But if that happens, then who needs us? The church becomes irrelevant. But if we insist upon never losing that uniqueness that comes from being his disciples, then we'll be able to bring flavor and light and direction to those who may be wandering in a bland and oftentimes dark world. So be salt, be light, be a city on a hill.